Okay, I guess my mic should work now. So, as you can see, I have actually gotten it, which is great. Which is not great is that I have actually already filmed this video and my next video, and both of them had troubles with audio. Actually, so bad troubles with audio that I had to film everything again, and this is my nightwear for today. I was thinking of maybe filming this later, but I just kind of want to get it done. Although it's past midnight, I might be causing some trouble for my neighbors by being awake and talking too loudly in the middle of the night. Now, unless someone comes to knock on the door, I'm just going to push through with this. And yeah, maybe it's not the greatest idea to do everything in my pajamas, but it's gonna be fine. Probably. I don't think anyone's gonna mind much. My dog, do not come here. Okay, go. This video will be about some information that I received from the fertility clinic on my first visit. I will show you the webpage, the quick overview of everything there. And then I will very briefly talk about the psychologist visit. And then I will go kind of my own thoughts that I already had, before I got links to those web pages that I myself had to think about before even considering whether I am going to have a child or not. And kind of things I think anyone who wants to have children should consider. So that's the theme for this video. And we start with the web pages. The psychologist visit, it was actually pretty much the same information that can be found on that webpage, and questions to me on my personal situation, basically things that Helminauha webpage would already suggest me to think about. So there wasn't anything surprising there. It was a 1 hour visit, and I was stressing a bit beforehand because I have never really gone to psychologist. I have gone to work therapist once, and it was basically because of tiredness. I guess there was a bit of a suspicion of a burnout, so I had a talk with her. I think it was just anemia because at the same time I had that therapist session, or in the same period I had that therapist session, I also had blood tests scheduled, and they showed that I had low iron levels, so that was probably why I was tired. So I don't really have much experience with the mental health side of things. I guess I kind of misunderstood the purpose of this psychologist visit, and I guess I was kind of worried that I would be grilled about, why would I choose to have a child on my own? Would I be able to take care of the child on my own? And, my money situation, my living situation, all those kind of things that I would be basically questioned and judged, and there would be a possibility that I would be told that I will not be able to receive these treatments because I was not good enough. And it wasn't anything like that, so no need to be nervous about a psychologist visit. Sorry, I was just telling my dog not to come here. It wasn't being judged. Basically, the psychologist was just talking to me, giving me information, and then asking me a couple of questions, having me answer them, and then giving me some more information. It wasn't really the psychologist questioning me. It was more like a conversation, and I think it was a good conversation. I didn't really feel that much pressure on while the conversation was ongoing. I felt a lot more pressure beforehand because my expectations were a bit out there, I guess. So, this psychologist visit, it's not really to judge anyone. It's mandatory. Anyone who wants to use donated cells in their fertility treatments need to have this visit. And, I think it's just getting the information told to you, and, having the psychologist make sure that you do understand everything you need to understand. And, nothing comes to you as a surprise after the treatments have already been done, the child has been born, and now there's some aspects that you did not consider beforehand, and you're in trouble, I guess. But there wasn't really anything new to me at that visit. I just answered all the questions truthfully, and that was fine. There wasn't really anything special. So now the things that I considered myself before, looking up all this information on those web pages, before having the psychologist visit, I already had a pretty clear understanding of what I needed to think about. And I think anyone would have pretty clear understanding, because it's not like these are some strange things that no one ever thinks about. It's mostly just common sense, and there can be some surprises. Like for me, it was surprising that there was a whole chapter, actually maybe multiple chapters, about how to tell your child how they were conceived. To me, that was strange because in my mind, I was like, I'm just gonna tell them. And it's mainly because I'm a single mother by choice. If it was a couple using donated cells in fertility treatments, it would be a lot more difficult because that would mean that there are two parents and one of them is not blood related to the child. I guess it would make things more difficult. But in my case, it's just one parent. There is no other parent. There's only donor who will not be present in the child's life until maybe after the child turns 18 and, gets all the information about the donor if they want to. Yes, there was also advice on how to react if your child wants to be connected to the donor, wants to meet the donor, wants to somehow have contact with the donor in the future. And for me, that wasn't really a problem either. I mean, by that point, my child would be 18. In my opinion, 18-year-old can do what they want, at least with their personal relationships, unless, they meet some person who's really destructive for their life. I feel like it would be just fine for them to meet their donor or have contact with their donor. I don't mind that, but it's true that there are people who would mind that a lot. So these were the things I didn't think about, but they do have something to do with me and do have something to do with the way that I'm trying to conceive my child. So I guess they are things that I do need to be aware of, even if I don't care about it that much. So things that I really cared about, well, the first was the part when I was considering whether I should have a child on my own or not. It's basically thinking if it would be selfish for me to have children. And this was also in the web page. I was for some reason surprised. I don't know why I thought that I would be unique in this thought. I guess it's because at the same time I was thinking that I was stupid for thinking it would be selfish. So I was surprised that a lot of other people were actually thinking the same thing that I thought was totally stupid of me to think about. Although this was kind of my biggest mental hurdle, it also didn't matter to me that much because, like I said, since the beginning, I was thinking that I was stupid for thinking that. I guess it would come down to whether your child has a good life or not. So if you're a single mother by choice, you have a child, that child has terrible life for some reason, maybe you lose your job, maybe you're completely broke, have to live in complete poverty, your child is miserable, and then you feel like I was really selfish for having this child. Maybe you're a single mother by choice, have your child, the child has wonderful life. You wouldn't really think that you were selfish to get that child at that point, right? And even if you were a couple, if you had some struggles, some trouble, which would also affect the growth environment of your child, you would also probably feel that maybe you were selfish when you got that child. And even if you yourself didn't feel that, maybe the people around you felt that you should not have gotten that child. Whether you were selfish or not when getting a child can be determined only afterwards, looking back and seeing how did everything go. If it went well, that's fine. If it didn't go well, then, you did something wrong and you should be judged. Or at least people will judge you, whether you should be judged or not. And I just don't feel you can predict future. I can't be completely certain that everything will go greatly, but I also have all the intentions of making my child's life perfect. Naturally, it most likely won't be. There will be some things that won't go as I think they will, and that's okay. That's life. I guess in a nutshell, I do think that having a child is kind of inherently selfish thing, whether it's one person or whether it's a couple. But I also think that that's just okay. I mean, people do a lot more selfish things than having children. And, that's just how people are. Sometimes people have to take risks. And sometimes people just have to do their best and hope that the result will be good. It's not a guarantee ever, I guess. So questions like, do I need a child? Or couldn't I be just fine without a child? Those kind of go along with, would I be selfish if I got a child? So I didn't really need answer to those in the end, because I already had this answer that yes, I would be selfish if I had a child, and so would be many other people who got children. And, as long as I had the best intentions and as long as I was, determined that I would make it work, I would have all the right in the world to be selfish. It's about my own life. After all, it would also be about my child's life, but that's also my responsibility as a parent. So the next issue would be my child's health. And this was also the issue that my mom mentioned the first time I told him that I would be trying to have children. So, I already told this all. First, she was kind of quiet, then she was happy, and after that happiness came this. So she was a bit worried that something would go wrong, and, maybe I would have a sick child. Maybe my child would have some sort of disability. And I guess I wouldn't really mind if it was kind of less invasive disability, like blindness or deafness or something like that, with which you would be able to still live somewhat independently. But, if it's mental disability, it would be more difficult to be a fully functioning adult and live on your own. And that's kind of what I wish for my child in the future. So it would be quite difficult for me to accept it. And, that was also my mom's biggest fear. But you don't really ever know with these things. So I'm healthy, at least to my knowledge. There isn't anything going in the family line. Oh, obviously, we here in Finland don't do so much genetic testing. I think they only test for chromosomes. And that's also in some cases, I guess, for newer donors. They would test that in the last few years or something. And as for the older ones, no testing, probably, except for maybe blood tests at the beginning. I also had to do blood tests, so I do believe they would do at least those. If you hear some noise, excuse my dog. He's just not willing to calm down right now at all. There is always a possibility that the child would be disabled, even if I, as the mother and, the possible donor themselves didn't have any disabilities. But, some risks have to be taken and you just can't get around them. So there is the ultrasound that scans for deformities, which I don't remember how many weeks along it would be. I think it was 10 to 12 weeks that you can have that ultrasound. So I am planning to have that ultrasound, as would anyone else in Finland. And depending on the results, I do believe that I would be considering abortion. That's not something I really want to do. If it ends up like that, I would not be happy about it. But I do think that I have to consider the rest of my life and also the rest of my child's life. Maybe this is selfish for me, but I don't want to give birth to a child just so that that child can then basically be kept alive by the society. I do think I have enough to provide for a healthy child until adulthood. But providing for someone who would need a nurse, who would maybe need to be hospitalized, who would maybe need to live in some kind of special facility, I don't think I have enough on myself to provide for that kind of child, and it would very much be an issue for the society here in Finland. So I would need to claim any government support I would be possibly able to get, and I would not feel comfortable about that, especially if I knew at the beginning that this child would not be able to grow up being a functioning part of society in the future. Ever since we were brought up the abortion issue in the ethics class and kind of went through it, also of course some other issues, it's not like we were solely focused on abortion, but it was one of the questions asked then, and ever since I thought about that, my answer has always been that only reason why I would get abortion would be if my child had some deformities or had some kind of genetic disease and would not be able to be a competent member of society. That's the only reason why I would consider abortion then and still now. Of course, just because you do that ultrasound, there are some conditions that would show up later. Maybe you wouldn't even know until after the baby has been born and, growing up for some time. Those are risks, and those are risks that I need to take if I want to have children, and those are risks that I'm willing to take. If in the end I find out that my child is disabled and I will have to look after the child for the rest of their life and for the rest of my life, then that's what I will be doing. I will try to prevent it, but if it comes to that, then I will be taking responsibility, and I think any parent should be taking responsibility, especially if they're getting pregnant was intentionally trying to have a child. Then no matter what kind of child it is, they should be taking the responsibility of the child after they have been born. Okay, the next issue is my own health. Anything could happen. I could get sick. I could get in some sort of accident. I could die. There isn't really anything I can say about that because I'm already living a pretty safe life. My hobbies are things like reading books, which is not dangerous. I think the most dangerous thing I do is driving a car. And I'm not really a reckless driver myself. I'm not a good driver, so maybe that's a risk factor. I usually don't drive to places where I have not been before. If I have to go, for example, into a strange city, I would usually ask if someone else can take me. So, I do recognize that I'm not a great driver. I do take some precautions to get some help when I feel like I might not be comfortable with the situation. So, goes back to the fact that I'm not a reckless driver. There shouldn't be any issues with that. I go to walks with my dog outside, but it's not like I'm walking by the big roads. I'm usually using walkways. Shouldn't be dangerous. I can't really say anything actually dangerous that I am doing. So I feel like I should be relatively on the safer side. Well, that's just accident. However, I am not drinking. I'm not smoking. I'm not absolutist. Well, I am with smoking. I will never smoke. but I'm not absolutist with drinking. I don't really like the taste of alcohol that much, so that's why I don't drink so much. I also don't really like lemonades that much. I guess those are also unhealthy, but not that unhealthy. All in all, although I do like eating a bit too much, I do like my chips. I think I'm pretty healthy, so I'm not really expecting to have any illnesses. There is some, high blood pressure and diabetes in my family. My dad was actually diagnosed recently with diabetes, and my mom has had high blood pressure for a long time. However, I have never had troubles with my blood pressure, and my dad did a little blood test to me with his diabetes kit, and although my blood sugar was somewhat high, it wasn't really alarming. So I guess at least for now I'm still good. There could be something in the future, but people don't really die that easily because of high blood pressure or diabetes. They could die because of those, or at least because of complications that come from those. My grandfather on my father's side, he had diabetes and he did end up dying eventually. He had to have his limbs amputated. It just was bad. So I do know that it could get bad for me also if I got diagnosed in the future. But there's really nothing I can do about it except try and eat more healthily, try to move, take my dog to walks. I'm working with that. Is it perfect? No, not really, but I'm working on it. And just because something might happen, whether it's an accident or an illness, I can't just, base my whole life around something that hasn't even happened yet and might not happen. So although I have considered the possibilities and I have thought about what my children would do at that point, there's really nothing much else I can do about these things. As for what I just said, what my children would do in that kind of situation, I do know my mother, and my mother is a bit like me in a way that she's quite territorial. She would not accept something like her grandchildren being raised by strangers. So if something happened to me and I was not able to raise my children on my own, either my mom would step in, or if my mom felt that she was not capable, she would make sure that one of my brothers would definitely step in. And if my brothers had some reasons why they would not be able to step in, I think she would take it to her parents, and her parents obviously wouldn't be able to do anything on their own. I mean, they're quite old, but they would definitely take it to their other children. And I also do feel like if my mom's side of family had trouble with helping, I think my mom would also call out to my dad's side of family. So, my mom would really be working on it if something happened to me. So because of that, I'm not really worried that my child will be put up for adoption in case something happens to me. And, I also don't think there's anyone in my family whom I wouldn't trust to take care of my children. There are some people in my family which I would kind of compare myself to and say that I would be able to be a better parent. But, I don't think there are any terrible parents in my family. And, everyone has their troubles, but everyone's managing the best they can. And I do think that that's enough, even if I myself think that I can do. So there's that also. I might be overly confident in myself. Those were the main problems I was considering. Of course, there is the financial aspect, but I haven't really considered that as deeply because I live in Finland. We have a pretty good welfare society, and my parents are alive and well. And I do think that I would also be able to rely on my brothers if I needed to. I do think I have a pretty good safety net that I would be able to, live relatively well, even if I myself had some trouble, like I was laid off or for some other reason I did not have stable income. I would still think I would be able to manage. So that's not really included in one of my worries, which is pretty good, I think, because maybe in Europe it would be more normal, but if you go outside of the Europe, the financial aspect might be the biggest consideration for some people. So I think it's pretty good that I'm able to be relieved of that. I mean, there are already so many other risks, so having to think about the financial situation, like my life and my child's life actually depended on that wouldn't be so great. Okay, I think this is about all I wanted to talk in this video. I hope that I will be able to edit it this time. The next video I will be making will be about my previous cycles and everything I did last year after I decided to do these fertility treatments. And I guess a bit about the way the fertility treatments work in Finland. Although I guess I have to mention that I have only done IUIs. I will be considering some other things later if I do not get pregnant in the few next cycles. Hopefully I do.